Hi, my name is Steve Goldberg, and I'm going to try to show you how to use Google Earth to help students empathize with news events and also gain global context. So let's grab a news event. This is from a few days ago in the New York Times, where, as you can see, controversy over the building of a dam is fueling a rare public outcry in the country of Myanmar, formerly known as Burma. So this is happening at the Myitsone Dam, and we could read this article in the New York Times, and I'd encourage students to do that. But for our purposes right now, I'm going to assume students have read this and that we want to look up Myitsone Dam. So I'm going to copy that and paste it in to Google. Gotta love Google. Rah, rah, rah. Okay. It's Jim Henson's birthday. So there's Myitsone Dam, and I've already done this search before, but here is the Wikipedia page for the Myitsone Dam, which I hope I'm pronouncing correctly. These are the GPS coordinates, and if we cut and paste those GPS coordinates, which is easier to do by clicking on that and just copying these, Control-C. Now I'm going to bring up Google Earth so I can get a sense of where this is. And it takes me into the Irrawaddy River, and that's where they're proposing to build this dam, roughly speaking. So I did this a little earlier, and I placed a place mark there. Get rid of this one. And now I've also put a whole bunch of information in there, and I would encourage students to do the same. So they cut and paste some pieces in there. There's a poem that we'll look at in a moment, and some other research that I did. And students would be doing this on a regular basis at the school I'm looking to open. But let's just finish this exercise here. So for many students, they'd need some context. So where is Myanmar? That's the outline of the country, Burma. And here are the Himalayas. Oh wow, I didn't realize they lit up like that. And so the reason you're putting a dam there is because it's going from high altitude to low altitude, the water is. And if you can put a turbine in a dam, you can create a good bit of energy. And so if we zoom in a little more, we get the country names, and we can see what is around here. And one of the things that one of the articles mentions is that this town here, Myitkyina, would be at danger of flooding if you were to put a dam here and it were to burst and the water were to come down at Myitkyina. So let's take a look and we're trying to bring an area to life and help students empathize with it. I just turned on the photo layer here, and let's click on a couple pictures. So now we can get a sense that's their, apparently, museum there. There's the portion of the Irrawaddy River near Myitkyina. And you get a sense of what life is like for people who live here, and how if it were to get flooded, that could be a pretty bad thing. So that's using some of the pictures on Google Earth. And I thought it might be interesting to see, it says it's in Myitkyina, but what state is that within Burma? It looks like it's the Kachin state. So if we want to get some context for that, here are some of the other states. This is Saigon, and it's up in the northern part of Burma. And if we do a little research, we can see here that we're up here in the Kachin state, there's Saigon, and there's a whole bunch of states, which makes sense. Just like the United States divides up, the country of Burma is divided up into several states. And that sort of helps you see it a little bit more, what's going on there. And then this is some additional research that I'd done. What's the big deal about putting a dam there? Well, we just talked about Myitkyina getting flooded. It's also a rainforest region. And so building a dam there would mess with the biodiversity in that area. And a third issue is that the dam would also disrupt transportation of nutrients to the Irrawaddy's delta, and that provides 60% of Burma's rice. But if you build it, which folks seem to be planning to do, despite the protests, there's a lot of energy that could come from that. And this first paragraph here, let's just scroll down and take a look at this. The massive dam under construction in this remote corner of Myanmar is generating a litany of concerns that are not uncommon to such projects. The risks of tampering with nature, damage to wildlife, and the displacement of villages, which we hadn't talked about there. And it goes on. And so this would be a great thing for students to look at, but it would also be great for students to see that this is not an isolated problem. And in fact, if we zoom out to see a good bit of Asia, nearby in India, I had read an article earlier from the BBC that talks about how Indian farmers are battling against a nuclear plant. So here, villagers are protesting against a dam, and here, folks on Madban Beach, which I found the same way, looking up its GPS coordinates, getting a sense of where it is. These folks are battling against this plant. And if we click on this BBC link, we get the article that I read about that. And another place, clearly, that is wrestling with energy issues is China. And what's interesting, if you read this New York Times article about this dam, is that the Burmese government isn't the one building the dam. They've allowed China to grow the dam. And why is China doing that? Well, as you probably know, there's incredible growth going on in China. And this city here, Chongqing, is a good example of that. It's, Chongqing. It's unbelievable growth. This I thought was a really interesting stat that in 1978, only 18% of Chinese lived in cities and towns, but by 2010, authorities estimated, and authorities have been right, that more than half the population is in cities. It's the greatest migration in human history. And mostly folks are going to the coast. But this is an amazing city here, Chongqing. And if we look at this a little bit, it's where several branches of the Yangtze River come together. My wife was looking at this with me, and she said, "Hey, are those bumps trees over here? Is that what those are?" And actually, no, those are not trees. Those are skyscrapers, and they're all over this area. And there's just an incredible amount of growth that is happening in China. And the big question here is, how do we fuel the need for power? One way China has approached that is the Three Gorges Dam. And we're just going to bring some quick math in here so this video doesn't get too long. We'll wrap it up. But this is something you've probably heard of, and the dam is pretty massive. This is the measuring tool on Google Earth. It's 3.2 kilometers, or about 2 miles across. So ships can pass through here, but this is the big turbine that generates all the energy. It generates about the equivalent of 16 nuclear power plants worth of energy. But the question, particularly for folks who live downstream, is what happens if this breaks? And for folks who live up here, who